Imagine a land so vast, lush, and brimming with life that one man saw it not as a home to millions, but as a treasure trove to fill his own pockets. From 1885 to 1908, King Leopold I of Belgium claimed the Congo Free State as his private possession, beneath the guise of civilizing the region. This enormous territory, larger than a third of the continental United States, became the stage for unimaginable suffering. Entire communities were uprooted, families torn apart, and countless lives sacrificed, all to feed Leopold's insatiable hunger for wealth. The Congo's dense forests hid secrets of forced labor and relentless pressure, as local people were coerced to harvest rubber and ivory under rules designed to maximize profit at any cost. Every day, ordinary Congolese men, women, and even children faced the harsh reality of quotas they could not meet, where the consequences were terrifyingly severe. Yet amidst this darkness, their resilience and courage quietly endured, a testament to human spirit against overwhelming odds. In this story, we dive deep into the untold punishments and the harsh systems that enabled them, exploring both the horrors and the endurance of those who lived through them. You will witness a history that is shocking, heartbreaking, and eye-opening, one that reminds us why remembering the past matters. If you want to uncover more truths, understand the full story of the Congo Free State, and explore history from perspectives that rarely reach the spotlight, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can shine a light on stories that deserve to be remembered and learned from. Are you ready to step into the Congo of the past and see history through the eyes of those who lived it? Let's begin. By the 1890s, the Congo Free State had transformed from a sprawling, mostly untamed land into a tightly controlled domain under King Leopold I. Driven by the insatiable global appetite for rubber, what had once been a mosaic of villages, forests, and rivers now became the theater of an economic experiment where human lives were measured not in their dignity or freedom, but in their ability to produce wealth. Leopold's administration swiftly nationalized vast stretches of land, declaring them the property of the state, and parceled out enormous concessions to private companies whose sole mission was to extract rubber and ivory at unprecedented scales. These companies, armed with the tacit approval of colonial authorities, imposed brutal labor policies on the Congolese people, treating quotas as sacred and any failure to meet them as unforgivable. From the moment workers entered the concession territories, their lives were reshaped by a rigid and unforgiving system. Men were compelled to trek through dense forests, gathering latex from wild rubber vines that clung to every tree, while women and children were often forced to support them under the same merciless oversight. Supervisors demanded that quotas be met regardless of the dangers posed by the terrain, disease, or exhaustion, and those who faltered were met with harsh punishments that could escalate without warning. The environment itself seemed to conspire against the workers. Swarms of insects, the threat of wild animals, and the relentless humidity made every journey into the forests an ordeal. Yet leaving the quotas unmet could bring consequences far worse than physical discomfort. To ensure compliance, the colonial administration deployed the force publique, a militarized force that combined European officers with local recruits, who enforced labor requirements with ruthless efficiency. Villages that failed to meet production targets were subjected to punitive raids, during which houses could be burned and families terrorized to compel obedience. The constant presence of armed overseers created a climate of fear that permeated every aspect of daily life, from the planting of crops to the care of children, eroding traditional social structures and leaving entire communities at the mercy of arbitrary enforcement. Even the small incentives offered by the companies, scarce items such as beads, knives, or salt, were insufficient to compensate for the immense suffering and disruption inflicted upon the Congolese population. Subsistence farming declined sharply as able-bodied workers were constantly drawn away to meet rubber demands, leading to widespread food shortages and malnutrition. further compounding the human cost of economic exploitation. Disease, already a persistent threat, flourished in these destabilized communities, and the social fabric that had once held villages together began to unravel under the strain of forced labor, famine, and fear. In this environment, the Congo's forests and rivers became silent witnesses to both relentless extraction and the quiet resilience of those enduring it. Despite the brutality, communities adapted where they could, finding ways to survive and maintain fragments of their culture, while the broader world remained largely unaware of the scale of human suffering taking place within Leopold's private dominion. The policies enacted in this era were not simply a reflection of economic ambition. They represented a systematic reshaping of a society under the weight of external greed, where the demands of a distant king and his commercial partners dictated the rhythms of life and death across an entire nation. The story of the rubber boom in the Congo is thus not merely one of resource extraction, but of endurance and survival amid the most extreme pressures, setting the stage for the eventual global reckoning that would confront the consequences of unchecked exploitation. As the demand for rubber surged and the Congo Free State became a tightly controlled engine of wealth, the enforcement of Leopold's edicts fell to the force publique, a militarized force tasked with ensuring that every quota was met, no matter the human cost. Comprised of European officers and local recruits from distant regions, the force publique moved through villages and forests with an authority that blurred the lines between law and terror, wielding power over a population whose survival had become inseparable from the whims of those in command. Entire communities lived under the shadow of this presence, where failure to gather sufficient rubber or ivory could trigger reprisals that were both immediate and devastating, leaving no room for negotiation or mercy. The punishments meted out were designed to instill fear as much as to enforce compliance, and their cruelty became the dark rhythm of everyday life. Villages that missed quotas were often subjected to raids that could leave homes reduced to ash, fields trampled, and families scattered, while individuals could face beatings that left scars far beyond the physical, or amputations that served as grim proof of the administration's reach. Even the presence of one or two armed men was sufficient to paralyze a community with anxiety, as the force publique demanded accountability, not only from those assigned to labor, but from entire villages, holding hostages men, women, and children alike until compliance was achieved. These acts were not random. They were part of a system that transformed the landscape into a network of coercion, where human life was subordinated to production targets, and where terror became a tool of governance. The psychological weight of this system cannot be overstated, as fear permeated every corner of daily existence. Parents labored alongside their children, knowing that any failure could result in the abduction of a loved one, and communities were forced to navigate a delicate balance between survival and obedience. The relentless drive to meet quotas disrupted agriculture and trade, leaving people malnourished and vulnerable to disease, while social structures that had guided life for generations began to crumble under the constant pressure. Epidemics of smallpox, sleeping sickness, and other illnesses spread rapidly in this destabilized environment, compounding the already severe losses inflicted by violence, and contributing to a dramatic decline in population that reverberated across the region. Even the few acts of resistance met with brutal suppression, as uprisings and rebellions were crushed with overwhelming force, leaving survivors to rebuild in a world where every misstep could be fatal. The force publique's methods extended beyond immediate punishment, creating a climate in which despair and survival instincts coexisted with a quiet, persistent resilience. As people adapted in subtle ways to avoid the worst of the violence, stories of those who feigned death, fled into the forests, or found secret means to protect their families reveal a human determination that endured even in the darkest conditions, a testament to the spirit of those living under extreme coercion. In the end, the force publique was more than a military organization. It was the instrument through which an entire economic system imposed its will, transforming ordinary labor into a high-stakes test of life itself. The villages, forests, and rivers of the Congo bore silent witness to the devastation wrought by quotas enforced with unflinching severity, while the echoes of fear, suffering, and resistance became an indelible part of the Congo's history. The population decline, the destruction of communities, and the enduring stories of courage all reflect the profound human consequences of a system where profit was measured in compliance and where survival demanded both endurance and ingenuity. The relentless exploitation of the Congo Free State under King Leopold I did more than extract rubber and ivory. It reshaped the very fabric of life for the people who called the land home, leaving deep scars on agriculture, culture, and family structures that would echo for generations. Villages once alive with the rhythms of planting, harvesting, and community life found their fields abandoned as men, women, and even children were conscripted into forced labor, trekking through forests and swamps to meet quotas that were often impossible to achieve. Crops rotted in the absence of tending, soil fertility declined, and the seasonal cycles that had sustained generations were disrupted, leaving famine as a recurring shadow over regions that had once produced abundant food. The physical deprivation was compounded by the psychological toll of constant fear, the ever-present threat of violence, and the anxiety of knowing that a single failure could bring punishment to oneself or one's family. Amid this, cultural practices and social cohesion began to unravel. Traditional leadership and community decision-making were undermined by the demands of the concession companies and the intrusive oversight of the force publique, as chiefs and elders were coerced, imprisoned, or held hostage to enforce compliance. Religious rituals, storytelling, and communal gatherings that had bonded generations were curtailed or abandoned entirely, replaced by the harsh routines imposed by colonial authorities. Families were separated as children were forcibly taken to what came to be known as child colonies, ostensibly schools run by missionaries but in reality sites of grueling labor, disease, and extreme mortality. The children endured long marches under the supervision of armed escorts, only to arrive at institutions where inadequate food, overcrowding, and rampant sickness claimed the lives of many before they could learn even basic skills, turning the promise of education into an instrument of survival or death. Disease, already a persistent threat in the region, flourished under these conditions. Malnutrition weakened immune systems, while disrupted water sources and the lack of proper shelter allowed illnesses such as sleeping sickness, smallpox, and dysentery to spread unchecked. The combination of disease, overwork, and violence created a vicious cycle, as population declined and communities struggled to maintain subsistence. The remaining workforce was pushed harder to meet rubber quotas, further exacerbating famine and social collapse. Those who survived learned to navigate a world of constant uncertainty, developing strategies to protect themselves and their loved ones, whether by feigning compliance, fleeing into the forests, or secretly supporting one another within the cracks of oppression. Even as villages emptied and fields fell fallow, the Congo's rivers and forests bore witness to the resilience of its people. Songs, oral histories, and acts of quiet resistance endured in hidden corners, preserving knowledge, identity, and hope against overwhelming odds. The child colonies, though lethal, also became symbols of both tragedy and determination, as a handful of children survived against staggering mortality rates, carrying with them the memory of lost siblings, parents, and communities. Across the territory, the interplay of violence, exploitation, and survival created a society transformed, one in which the physical and cultural landscapes were forever altered by the mechanisms of extraction and coercion. Yet through famine, disease, and oppression. The spirit of the Congolese people persisted, a testament to endurance in the face of systems designed to strip them of everything but their labor. The story of these years is one of unimaginable hardship, but also of human resilience, highlighting the profound consequences of colonial greed and the enduring strength required to preserve life, identity, and hope amid devastation. Even as the Congo Free State descended further into a cycle of forced labor, violence, and famine, voices from beyond its dense forests began to pierce the veil of secrecy that King Leopold I had maintained for decades. Missionaries stationed across the territory witnessed daily the suffering of the Congolese people, observing the destruction of villages, the amputations, and the relentless coercion that had become the order of the day. Their letters, reports, and photographs carried vivid accounts of these horrors, offering the outside world a glimpse into a reality that Leopold sought to hide beneath the rhetoric of civilization and progress. These missionaries risked their safety to ensure that the stories of pain and endurance were recorded, knowing that silence would only prolong the suffering of those trapped under a system that commodified human life. George Washington Williams, an American journalist and historian, was among the first to confront Leopold directly. Traveling through the Congo, he compiled evidence of widespread atrocities and wrote an open letter to the king, detailing the exploitation, killings, and systemic abuse of the Congolese people. His courageous act not only challenged Leopold's claims of benevolence, but also introduced the language of crimes against humanity into public discourse, framing the Congo's plight as a moral and legal issue that could no longer be ignored. Williams' words resonated across continents, inspiring debate and concern in political and social circles alike, while providing the foundation for future advocacy. Meanwhile, literary figures such as Joseph Conrad transformed first-hand observation into haunting narrative, capturing the psychological and moral devastation wrought by the colonial enterprise. In Heart of Darkness, Conrad drew on his experiences traveling the Congo River to illustrate the human cost of unchecked greed and systemic violence, weaving a story that combined fiction with profound social commentary. Though framed as a novel, his work conveyed the lived realities of countless individuals whose labor and lives had been exploited, bringing a wider audience into direct emotional engagement with the Congo's suffering. Edmund D. Morel, a shipping clerk turned activist, added momentum to the movement for awareness and reform. By meticulously analyzing shipping records and company accounts, he revealed the economic mechanisms underlying the atrocities, showing that the flow of rubber and ivory was sustained by coercion and brutality. Morel combined these findings with compelling pamphlets, newspaper articles, and public speeches, galvanizing public opinion in the United Kingdom and beyond. His relentless campaign helped form the Congo Reform Association, which pressured governments and international organizations to confront Leopold's abuses and demand accountability. Together, the efforts of missionaries, journalists, and authors created a chorus that could not be ignored, gradually lifting the curtain on a regime that had relied on secrecy and fear to function. Their documentation transformed abstract reports of suffering into tangible evidence, evoking empathy, outrage, and moral responsibility in readers and policymakers across the globe. Through letters, novels, investigative journalism, and advocacy, they ensured that the Congo story reached far beyond its rivers and forests, becoming a subject of international concern and igniting campaigns that would eventually challenge Leopold's rule. In doing, these chroniclers preserved the memory of the Congolese people's suffering, while reminding the world of the enduring power of truth, telling in the face of oppression, setting the stage for reforms that would, however imperfectly, acknowledge and begin to address decades of injustice. By the early 20th century, The hidden horrors of the Congo Free State could no longer remain concealed. The tireless efforts of missionaries, journalists, and activists had awakened global outrage, drawing the eyes of governments, organizations, and ordinary citizens to the unimaginable suffering endured by the Congolese people. Reports of mutilations, forced labor, famine, and the devastating social impact of Leopold I's rule sparked a moral reckoning across Europe and North America, creating a swell of public pressure that could not be ignored. Political leaders faced mounting demands to intervene, while international campaigns highlighted the stark contrast between Leopold's promises of civilizing the Congo and the brutal reality on the ground. The cumulative weight of this global scrutiny eventually forced the Belgian government to act. In 1908, after decades of personal exploitation, King Leopold I was compelled to relinquish control of the Congo Free State, which was absorbed into the Belgian colonial administration and renamed the Belgian Congo. This transition marked the official end of Leopold's private dominion, a rare instance in history where sustained international activism directly challenged and limited the power of a monarch. The transfer of authority also exposed the depth and scale of human rights abuses to a wider audience, making it impossible for the atrocities to be dismissed or forgotten. While the Belgian administration promised reforms, the scars left by decades of exploitation remained deeply etched in the land. The culture and the collective memory of the Congolese people. The legacy of this period is a sobering reminder of the consequences of unchecked greed and the importance of vigilance, advocacy, and moral responsibility. Millions of lives were lost or irreversibly altered, families torn apart, and communities disrupted. Yet the stories of endurance, resilience, and quiet defiance continue to resonate. Remembering the suffering of the Congolese under Leopold I is not simply an exercise in recounting historical events, it is a call to recognize the human cost of exploitation, to honor those who endured, and to ensure that lessons from the past guide our understanding of justice and human dignity today. As we reflect on this dark chapter, it is vital to keep these stories alive, to share them with new generations, and to learn from the courage of those who survived. If this story moved you or shed light on a piece of history you had never fully understood, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to our channel to explore more untold histories. Your support helps us continue uncovering the hidden truths of the past, ensuring that the voices of those who suffered are never forgotten. The Congo's past echoes through the present, reminding us that human dignity is priceless, and that collective awareness and action can challenge even the most entrenched systems of exploitation. Let this story inspire reflection, compassion, and a commitment to justice, as we honor the resilience of a people who endured one of history's most harrowing chapters and emerged with their spirit unbroken.